Welcome back to Deep Thoughts, ladies and gentlemen, on this beautiful Sunday afternoon. Today's episode is going to be about our differences. So there are obviously a ton of people watching stuff online. Some of you bump into this show. Sometimes I make a show that you completely believe, or you don't have any differences with my opinions here and there. And again, they're just my opinions, right? I've had a very intense life. I've been into several corners of this universe in terms of experience. I'm still at a infinitely small sample of what the world has to actually offer, Earth, that is. And nevertheless, I feel packed with all these tiny experiences that I have had, When I look out at the world, I meet new people. It takes a really long time to meet someone who has had as much diversity as I've had, and even tougher to find folks with more experiences than I have. And I meet them all the time, but it takes, 10 people to find one person who has lived as much life, and then, maybe 1 in 50 who's just utterly blown past me. And I'm going to qualify that because I'm not trying to sound the slightest bit boastful. The idea is, I would debate whether or not to keep some of the experiences I've had. Probably keep some of the decisions I made that gave me the experiences, right, where I made an informed decision. Or uninformed decision, excuse me. But there's this interesting thing that happens when you make a YouTube channel. And I see people deal with it sometimes, and I see most of the pros just ignore it. But this is not that kind of show, where, again, I like to see people subscribe, but I'm not exactly happy when I see someone unsubscribe, and that's the honest truth. But it's only because I think of the community of people that I've seen hit the locked Facebook group, or people that are really devout commenters on YouTube. I feel like the whimsical, easy come, easy go. Hey, there's no emotions attached to those folks, right? They came in for one video. Maybe they're Bigfoot buffs, and they jumped in and they thought what I said was fair, at least, and so they jump on for a little while, and then they don't see anything else Bigfooty or supernatural or whatever, and they're like, this channel's not for me, and they go. That's just natural selection, right? You want to spend your time wisely, and if a person unsubscribes from this channel to more focus and hone on what they're interested in, then where's the problem in that, right? So, but the reason why I'm making this particular video is that there are some great contributors to the YouTube channel as well as the Facebook channel. Once you get into Facebook, people are just so chill, and you guys contribute so much information and so many articles. Sometimes I'll be at work doing something, heads down, and I'll look up on my phone, maybe on the way home, and I'll see 10 things I need to approve when I get home. I'm not approving every single thing that people submit, because sometimes it's just too much information in a short period of time that I think that, I'm just not sure. Or things are a little, sometimes they're repeated, by the way. Sometimes you guys don't realize that way down the page, what you just submitted to the page has actually already been submitted. So sometimes that happens as well. So don't take any offense. But I want to dive into a few subjects and just sort of the principles of how I think that differences have been branded to us. Because having a difference with another human being means different things at different times, means different things with different subjects, you know. If we went to, say, a pizza place together and, you know, it's almost given after you pass the age of 20 that you need to check on the ingredients and the people that you're with to see who has preferences. You know, sometimes a food is just merely a taste preference. Sometimes it's a biological preference, or, you know, you're a vegan and you don't want to eat meat, and you don't want to even share half the pizza if it has meat on the other side because of your beliefs. Hey, some of you have health issues, and eating a lot of greasy meats are a problem, but you can eat other meats that aren't greasy. You know, it just depends. In those scenarios, we have a difference that we acknowledge. We respect those differences, and it's not a big deal. It's not a bump in the road for us. But other more fundamental differences that lead to a method of how to live become very important to us. And so we feel as if someone is not like us, then we have an issue. But more importantly, if we feel like someone is evangelizing this difference between what we believe and what, you know, others believe, we sometimes perceive that there's a lot of harm being done, which we get into even common law operations of how we live, right? Our modus operandi. So I want to get into this because there are some brilliant folks who contribute to the channel, and obviously there is no way in hell that we could sit down and agree on everything. But I think that it's we're getting rid of fake news, right? We're getting rid of people talking to you like this, right? They just patronize you. They try to put as many puns and plays on words inside their news reporting, and we're just getting sick and tired of it. Because now we've seen the long-term disadvantage of sort of living in a news methodology or an information infrastructure on the world that is, you know, really only, it gained its inroads as the printing press really shifted over to the Randolph Hearst yellow journalism, and now we've seen it pumped up to the point where governments are actually trying to pass laws to force you to take super bad propaganda, right? We see that hurting society. And so, the governments are trying, they're going to fail. The news agencies are trying to save themselves. Print is really funny because print, actual newspapers are really trying to demonize the speed at which information comes to us, the speed of which bullshit could be called, because they will print something on the front page that isn't true, and there's only one bias, basically the whoever wrote the article, and then the editor who has it spun a particular way, and then it goes out, and that's what they've been able to do for hundreds of years in one way or another. Today we dismantle that because we don't like being lied to. Now, with certain things, it's a hell of a lot easier to validate the information. If it's a real-world event, and there was a lot of people spectating who aren't in on the bias, and they have the ability to look into a telephone, post a message on a social media apparatus, we can triangulate the truth out of the propaganda. And so for those matters of which we might disagree, the real exercise at that point is simply to say, please just bring me the other perspectives that you saw that counteract the ones that I think I saw. That's why the term smoking gun has become not only just a catchphrase, it's all over the web, but it's become our scientific method to vet fake information. There are, people want to debate moon missions, and then NASA greenlights something called Project Orion. Project Orion was trying to put human flesh through the Van Allen belts without killing it. After they realized that they had admitted that they never went to the moon because, that was not a problem for any of the moon missions, they canceled the project, which means they probably just took it out of the limelight and changed its name on the books. But there are some subjects that are very, very important to us. as individuals. They always tell this lie about America that it was founded on the freedom of religion. It was a byproduct of freedom of speech. But it wasn't why people sailed across the ocean. They sailed across the ocean to get away from tyranny, from financial and government monarchical tyranny. I don't even know if monarchical is a word, but the monarchy control over various regions of Europe. They were tired of the church telling them what they had to believe. If freedom of religion had any validity in some person going down to the shore and jumping on one of the 3 ships that came over, it was that the church was a bullying organization. You know, that the Pope, I shouldn't say that, the first incarnations of Christianity in Europe forged through the Inquisitions the use of mercenaries, like Blackwater, right? What was Blackwater? Well, Blackwater was ex-military experts, Delta Force, all the way down to your standard special forces, the best at what they do on planet Earth. They're handpicked usually because they have very little connection to an immediate family. You know, they have extended family, but they don't have like wives and children a lot of times. So that way they have nothing to risk, and they're just looking to take the pain away with a little bit of a paycheck. And so they're willing to do things that aren't allowed in the world. And of course, the whole thing was shoveled into the Middle East as this organization is sort of operating outside of the law. They're not, even though they're American citizens a lot of times, they're not governed by, you know, conventions of war and that sort of thing. And I've got some friends of mine that know a lot about those guys, as well as some folks that have been in it, and the stories of what they did back in the heat of the post 9/11 era. It's unbelievable. The reason why those people were hung and burned on a bridge, once you know about the regional disputes and what was admitted to have occurred, you'll understand why those people were, you know, lynched. It's a sad, unfortunate thing. But right now, we're in a very interesting time, right? We have folks that are waking up, and they're waking up to all kinds of different lies that have gone on for years. And again, some of these lies don't really matter, even though we find them important and very interesting. For instance, you know, we've had pretty much, I think, the full exposure of JFK's assassination. We have the exposure of, you know, the moon missions, I think, are pretty good. We get a little bit of 9/11 in there and Oklahoma bombings and all the other fake massacres that happen. Doesn't mean people don't die. It just means that they're orchestrated for our manipulation. And, you know, you might bump into a friend that has never heard any of the information, or the information is so overwhelming, they simply aren't ready in their particular position in life to deal with it. And you have to give them that freedom. I've said several times on the show that my previous show, MKL2 Radio, which was just a radio audio show, you know, I called my buddy of 20 years, Kyle, and I was just all excited because I was awake, and I just sort of dropped a couple pieces on him, and he was not ready. And he, for the very first time, sort of, you know, chastise isn't really the right word, but he sort of said things to the effect of, you just can't deal with the fact that there's bad people in the world and bad things happen, meaning Arabs who want to knock down buildings and stuff. So I hang up the phone with him, and about 8 months later, he calls me up while I was on vacation, and the first thing I heard is, you know, I've seen it now, and I can't unsee it. And you were right, you know. And he had gone down a whole different rabbit hole using Zeitgeist the movie. So I gave him the space. He woke up, and he woke up extra hard, and he was the one that came to me and said, let's start a radio show. And I was the one who was hesitant, because I was like, that's a lot of darkness, man. Don't know if I want to be associated with all that stuff. But that blossomed into this show, where I felt like I needed more time to really dive into the cerebral stuff that he doesn't have much interest in, right? But I want to dive into at least a few subjects. I think the two that we're really going to talk about, and one's going to be slightly a repeat, which is flat earth, and the other one is going to be religion. But before we jump totally in, let's think about this for a second. There's two halves to the disagreement algorithm when you find yourself in disagreement with someone. There's way more slices in that, way more dimensions, way more attributes, but I'm going to go after two so we can have a nice, simple, productive, hopefully, conversation about this. There's something really strange about being wrong. And part of it is because when we were kids, and I say kids, it could be 18 and below, being wrong is one of these things where the assholes in the neighborhood that you hung out with pointed a finger at you and laughed. Made fun of the fact that however your brain's working inside, you were gullible, you were not knowledgeable, but the fact remains you might have been right and they might have been wrong. But the mass mob hysteria around being wrong and chastising an individual is just inbred in us at a very early age. I'm not sure that a kid, when I deal with kids and there's something that they have wrong, I'm very gentle with them. I don't really spend any time. I just say, oop, no, not that one. It's this one over here. Boom, boom, boom. And it's always in an upbeat way so the kid doesn't feel defensive about it. But I can tell you right now, I can see kids that have been raised real well and not been exposed to the chastising of being wrong. And I can see the kids who immediately respond badly no matter how much I polish it, because they, well, one, we value our intelligence, but two, they've been ridiculed at some point by a parent. That's why I think all these videos where parents prank their kids and cause really horrible emotional scars in them, it's if we had a child protection service that wasn't linked to pedophilia, which it is, they needed a visit, in my opinion, but I wouldn't send them after any family at this point unless the child be stolen. But you'll see these parents who they wrap fake presents. They bought the kid what they want, but they want to have fun at the expense of the child's beautiful morning on Christmas. And go see my Santa episode if you have anything against Christmas. We'll go through that conversation in a separate episode that already exists. But the kid opens up a brick, the kid opens up, a bag of poop or whatever, and of course they're emotionally completely devastated. The parent has taught the child, you can't trust me. And I will do anything to entertain myself, including hurt your feelings, betray your trust. The kids go into these, hysterics, and it's so much more dimensional. A lot of times they'll see criticisms on the child in the comments of such a thing. I haven't watched these in a long time, but I did take there was some compilation someone put together, and it was just really horrific parenting. And the kid is just like, what the fuck is wrong with the world is sort of how they're approaching their emotions. And the parents are laughing their asses off because the parent, who can't be that intelligent, in my opinion, has got the gift that they really want, tucked away. But they make the kids say a bunch of things that they shouldn't say. And, the kid's like, fuck you, blah, 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 I hate you, blah, blah, blah. And then they give them the gift. And now all of a sudden the kid owes the parent an apology on Christmas Day for being lied to, right? So I mention that because as children, what's interesting about being a kid, all right, and we all know this, is a lot of fucked up shit happens when you're a kid and there ain't no one around to make it right. You get 6 or 7 kids somewhere in a park, somewhere in a offshoot area or whatever, even in a bedroom where they're all trying to hang out together for some reason, and someone says something horrific, someone's lying, someone is betraying somebody, and yeah, it's petty stuff when it comes right down to it. But, you'll have kids push kids off cliffs, just because it's funny, because he's a dick and he doesn't know what, it's a potentially fatal, fall. I mean, there's just all kinds of stuff that happens, and it scars the living crap out of us when we're young. And as long as there's one bad family in the neighborhood, and all I mean is really bad at raising children, The kids from that family are trying to run around the world figuring everything out serendipitously, and they're horrible at it, because who could be an expert at life until someone kind of points you at shit and shinola, right? But I think that that's where the incubation of being wrong really hurts. That's where it first hurts. Now, it gets even more acidic and more punishing and more horrible when you get older if some form of that happens, even in a more intellectual way. Which is why most of us search for the truth about all things, right? But religion is a huge one, right? The good thing about people who differ about religion is that the subtext of the difference is that we want the best for humanity. We want the best for other people. And that is sort of this generic kernel that gets inserted into all movements. Now, some folks are informed from sort of a global perspective. You have both the beliefs of religion and you have the beliefs of those who don't believe in religion. You might have parsed religions into pop science, Christianity, and Judaism, Muslim, Islamic beliefs, across the board, Buddhism, Hinduism, everything, right? And then some folks come in with brilliant recollections of their particular paradigm. They live within whatever religion that they have found, and they have become amazingly informed. They can tell you chapter, verse, book, of every single thing that's going on. And in their mind, they have lived in it enough that they have solved for all the anomalies and the contradictions. They don't want to find any, for one thing, but, for whatever reason, it just jives with them. Whoever wrote the book was speaking to them, right? And so we always say enlightenment on this show is just the pure definition, which is to see more, right? So think about someone who has been, born into Christianity. Again, they were given Santa Claus, Tooth Fairy, Easter Bunny, every other fictitious thing that's fun as a child, and Christianity. Christianity, as I said, and Why We Believe, which I think is like episode 4, way back in season 1, it's all about keeping religion as the one fictitious magic world where you don't have to give it up. And isn't that fun, right? What if somebody said, you know what, all of the card tricks you've ever seen in life are fake. They're sleight of hand, they're misdirection. However, at the Magic Castle in Los Angeles, it is the one place where magic is real. So when you go to the Magic Castle, if you have a friend that can get you an invite, I heard it's actually non-invite, or it's it's open to the public now, is what I understand. You still have to get reservations, and you have to dress in a suit and a dress. But let's say it was real there. Well, where would you try to spend a lot of your time if you loved magic? You would go to this Magic Castle because that's where it's real. Now the thing is if whatever you're believing makes you a good person, who cares what anyone else thinks, right? If someone listens to this particular show and they have been, let's say, Christian, and they hear me parse it several times, give you Dr. Atwell's research, my own research from Egyptology all the way up. We start talking about, all the evidence that particular things weren't true. But in the end, I give credit to the morality of Christianity because in America, I can unequivocally say there's no class that I am aware of from K through 12 plus, your graduate, postgraduate, and PhD level that teaches morality. I'm sure there's some specialized course somewhere out there, but it's too late if you're learning it in college, for Christ's sake. You need to learn this stuff when you're young. And the only place in this country it happens is Christianity. And even if you have parents that are non-religious or atheist, or agnostic or whatever, they're still teaching morality to you based on usually what has been handed down to them from grandparents and what have you. Now, I would love to believe that common law is something that we all strive for. Don't mess with anyone else, and they won't mess with you on average. I don't know what the odds are, but it's pretty high that people won't mess with you as long as you don't mess with them. But what's interesting is this. When you think about the past events that have occurred in this particular country alone, all the conspiracies, pick one. You could live a pretty beautiful life from this point forward, not knowing about any of them. Now, you're bound to repeat history. You're bound to be very gullible to fake news and fake events that are going to occur in the future without knowing that. But you, as an individual, could live a pretty darn good life, if you so choose to. You might end up in a tyrannical place in the end, but maybe you won't mind that either because you won't know any different. But with religion, there's an interesting caveat to it all, especially Christianity, because the name of the game is selling salvation. You are broken when you were born, and you need man's help to find God, or you will go to what the paradigm says and labels and calls hell. And the place you really want to go is what they casually define as heaven. And so, obviously, when you look at it at face value, don't do any research or any role-playing on what either one of those two realms would be and why a omnipotent, brilliant creator would create them in the first place, okay? You're thinking that everyone in the world will go to hell. That's the way God's built the place. He gives birth to children who are all going to hell. Isn't that fucking weird, man? Isn't that just the weirdest belief system on planet Earth? And the way that you get out of that sort of pre-existing contract with God, right? You're a baby. You're a baby and you're just born and you're going to hell. Now, people will... I've been around plenty of Christians in my life, and when you really say it that clearly, which is what they preach in any other conversation, you will get people violating the belief system of the Bible in order to make sure that you don't walk away from their church. They will say, oh, well, I don't really think God takes babies to hell. And it's like, well, that's just your belief. Where is that in the Bible? According to the Bible, Genesis sets us all up to fail, and the New Testament is the one methodology, and I mean one methodology, for that baby to save itself. So if the baby dies in 2 years, Catholics think it goes to purgatory and never makes it to heaven. Some fucking weird place, right? But if your baby is unable to understand what you're saying and it dies, well, whoopsie, goes straight to hell, right? And again, Christians will jump in on this and throw out life preservers and parachutes for that baby. But there's none of that written in the Bible at all, right? So yeah, I have a problem with that personally, right? But someone who believes in that without diving super deep and willing to dive around the written literature that they have been submitted, okay, they'll think that a person like myself is instigating more instances of hell for human beings moving forward because they're stuck within the paradigm without a periscope to look outside that and look back at themselves. Now, I had a distinct geographical advantage in the way I was brought up to pull my head out of any bias I might have had, and that was being moved around a lot as a kid. However, spending, I think it's a 12-year stint I spent in my hometown. It was like 3.5 to 9, almost 3.5 to 8, and then I came back at 13, I guess, or maybe technically 12 or something like that, but my birthday was right after that, and I left at 17. So whatever the hell that is. I guess it's only about 9 years. But I was raised in a teeny tiny town that was safe and wonderful and religious, and then I was shipped all around the United States. I was born in Europe, but I don't remember that stuff that well, right? I wasn't making any opinions or decisions about the vector of my life. But once I popped out of a little town and went to a major city, I realized that the world I was living in was very relative to where I came from. And that all my belief systems, which a lot of them are just how to behave and work hard and be a good person, well, in the city it was much more dog eat dog. And so they don't have the privilege of playing that game. You play the good Samaritan in New York in the 70s, and you're going to get mugged. Was it Times Square in the 80s was atrocious, man. That's why Giuliani is known for cleaning all that up. And so it wasn't hard for me to ever crawl out of a paradigm after my life had been conditioned like that to say, look, you're from a very small place, and the rest of the world doesn't live like this. And it probably wasn't until college that I really found out that Christianity is one of the smallest religions on this planet, and that Catholicism is the fastest shrinking religion on this planet. Now, a lot of times what happens in the comments is that someone will say that I have something very intensely misunderstood. And I understand that, and I absolutely respect that. And again, I wish it was possible to have some really cool venue where we could all go and, but maybe a different show, but I talk like this, and everyone's got a mic, and we got 4 or 5 cameras. Everyone's got a good shot. Maybe even have a guy that's running some handheld camera, and that everyone could express their opinions, and we could all just acknowledge that person's opinion. Maybe we differ, but at no point do we disrespect our differences, right? Because I know personally, when I was in the Christian movement for the second time, and when I really chose it instead of being thrown into it at 18 years old, there was a funny moment I've recalled a couple times in episodes where we had a, what the hell you call it, but it's where you spend the whole night in the church as kids. And there was obviously elders there. And by elders, you're talking about people in their late 20s, maybe up to their late 40s tops, like half a dozen watching us kids get a little crazy. But they had this exercise where this little fun project, because we're there all night, where one of us was selected to be the preacher, and you had to just ad-lib a sermon, and I volunteered, and I went up there, and I don't know why it came over me, but it came over me really, really powerfully at 18 years old. And I just happened to have like 3 elders sitting in the front pew. And, they're not expecting anything serious to come out of an 18-year-old kid. And I went into this sermon about the fact that, I had just recently discovered that the preacher of our church believed that Genesis was more of an allegorical, symbolic story of what happened at the beginning of the universe. And he didn't believe it was literal. The elders that I lived with believed it was literal. And they were actually fairly upset that he had admitted that to me. They were upset that the man that ran their church had a different opinion than theirs. But what dawned on me when I discovered this was that everyone has a different opinion about everything in the Bible. I don't care what religion you're a part of. The only reason why someone would say, yes, I believe what you believe, yes, I believe what you believe, is because you got an AK-47 and they don't. You're their boss and you're not their boss, But when a man, and I mean human, is put in a room and allowed to really admit what they believe with no perceived consequence of their particular opinion, our opinions are as close to snowflakes as you could possibly imagine, and not your Hillary Clinton snowflakes, but we're all different. We're all absolutely different. And if you think about sort of a fractal pattern, one of these mathematical self-supplying, self-iterating algorithms where you take the results of the algorithm and you put it back into its reuse, that's where you create fractals. Any tiny sway of difference between us creates a gigantic different thing, right? So if you had little, nano systems running around, my patio here using concrete as the building mechanism, and I say, you guys, you 5, do whatever you think you need to do, and here's your initial program, but you have a variable in there that you can extrapolate from the environment, and I put another 5 over there on the other side of my patio. Well, over here I might get a pyramid, and over there I might get a, twin tower. It's going to be different, and it's just a mathematical certainty of anything that has intelligence. And what is intelligence? Well, it's the harvesting and processing and classifying of information. It doesn't have to be an encyclopedia. It could be you have information about how the wind blows on your skin. And you're Latin. You have thicker skin than me. I have, fairly thick German skin, but I'm fair-skinned, right? So my opinion about spending a day in the sun might be different than your opinion of spending a day in the sun, right? What I want to create is a situation where we can have our differences, and you see that empty comment field underneath a YouTube video or a post in Facebook as your ability to evangelize your beliefs and your differences to everyone who's going to read your comment, which, based on what I've seen, in the last several videos, I mean, it's really been going on for dozens and dozens of videos, but the conversation between you guys, the replies that you put on each other's posts is increasing ever so slightly. And you're going to have someone who agrees with you and disagrees with me. And I think that's awesome. There's nothing wrong with that. Like I've always said on the show, if you disagree with me, the beautiful thing about disagreeing with me is, one, I'm not in your face, right? Again, if a video starts rubbing you really, really badly and you feel angry at me, well, you can turn it off. You can push pause or push stop or whatever, and then get in that comment section and explain why you think I'm wrong. And you can even tell me, there's plenty of comments out there, dude, you're totally got this wrong, ba 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 ba. One, you're galvanized on your beliefs even more now. And that's valuable, isn't it? I mean, think about it. When you go into a room and you talk to a bunch of people that believe what you believe, is there any fortification really in what you believe by having a conversation with everyone that already believes what you believe? I don't think so. I don't think that needle moves a single inch towards, I believe this more now. But when I argue a point that is contrary to your belief, you then see the other side of why you think it is the way that you've already determined. Or maybe you parse the information a little bit more and you go even further down the rabbit hole that you showed up with, right? Now, I'm the type of guy that's like, I don't want to piss anybody off necessarily, right? It's not my style. However, outside of this channel, okay, then what I'm about to say is not related to this channel. And I've mentioned this several times in different videos about, what kind of friend I am, I'll put it that way. I can have a friend of mine that struggles deeply with life, and they simply don't know what to do, and I'm there to help as much as I can, right? Offer different perspectives, offer encouragement, to give them sort of some mechanism to find the ladder to climb themselves out of a hole. But there's a point when a number of weeks go by and they just dwell in their negativity. They dwell in the law of attraction that is demise. And unfortunately, there are some rough times out there for people right now, and they're having a problem dealing with their lives. And the amount of people I know that are damn near homeless, sometimes of no fault of their own, and sometimes due directly to their own negligence, it's alarmingly high right now. And it's barely a percentage, right? But it's still, when you're a person like myself who's had to work really, really hard for everything I've ever had, I know that if I stopped working really, really hard, not just hard, okay, but way beyond the basics, I would probably be, homeless and destitute, That's probably not the truth, but that's how I approach life, just to make sure I've always got a little bit in reserve. I got a little bit of coasting room in case I'm struck with a random event, like a bad economy or something, right? But I also don't play it safe. I like adrenaline. I like dopamine. I like to take risks. And part of me just simply says, well, I'll take this risk and maybe I lose everything, but God damn it, I took the risk and I lived that life, and on my deathbed, I will have no regrets, right? So what happens to these people around me that linger in self-pity, especially when they've crossed a certain, age bracket where I think they need to be a goddamn adult. For me, I was an adult as a kid. I was forced to. But once you hit 30, you're responsible for yourself. You're responsible for getting rid of stuff. Previous events that have scarred you, you need just to stop giving a crap about it and move on. Own your life, right? So I've definitely parted with probably at least a dozen friends / acquaintances, because at some point I just said, all right, I've listened to this long enough. It's time for you to get your goddamn life together, get your act together, stop sitting around in pity. You've surrounded yourself with a bunch of enablers who just cry with you, but they won't fucking help you, right? And there's no one coming. There's no one coming to help you. You're a fucking adult. Get your shit together and get going, right? Stop waiting for this imaginary, dude on a white horse to come after you or whatever the fuck you need, right? And honestly, the closer you get to me, I'm probably more real like that now. Obviously, the more trials and tribulations I go through with individuals, we can have those conversations in a couple words. And it's just kind of like, for a person, like I've got a bunch of guys who've gone through hell and back who've done way more than me. I like to surround myself with the folks that have done more than I have with life, to be quite frank, because then I can have great conversations with them. If silence enters the room, I just go, what about that thing you did a long time ago? Tell me about that. And I just sit back and listen to an amazing life story, right? So I dig people like that. But if they're pissing and moaning, most of my friends don't do any of this shit, I'll just give them a look. That's all it takes. And they're like, I'm bitching and moaning, aren't I? I'm like, yeah, you are. I'm being a pussy. Yep. Time for me to get my shit together. Yep. It's time. And the nice thing is as soon as they start kind of acknowledging, whatever it is they're going through, they know I'm right there. They know I'm like, whatever you need, man, I will help you to the extent I can. And we work out. That's why most of my friends are doing great, We all need to vent, right? But on this show, it's not about that. I don't know any of you, really. Even those of you I've had lots of good chats with on the side. I've even Skyped probably half a dozen folks that I think are wonderful people, a lot of which we have no differences that matter at all. And sometimes, sometimes what will happen is I give people a platform to talk, and I represent them. I don't believe what they believe, which is sort of where we get to the flat earth side of things. My mind's open. I don't know. I believe it's one way because in part it was indoctrinated into me. I do not believe, to be honest, and this is something we don't usually say, I personally have no proof with my eyes or any other sense that I have that I'm on a round sphere. I don't have any of that evidence. All I've got is pictures from an agency that sells pictures for a living. And they make 80%, if not 95%, fake pictures and sell it to the press as if it's real. So why the hell would I go to them to certify something, And again, these theories existed, the round earth, spherical earth, heliocentric earth theories existed way before these agencies existed. It doesn't mean I think it's flat. It's just I have to acknowledge what I know and what I don't know, and tone down the hubris and tone down the indoctrination and the knee-jerk opinion about things. When it comes to religion and God, what I find very fascinating about it is that unlike the community that is exploring flat earth, where people wake up and they go, yeah, I don't feel like I'm spinning. And there's all these anomalies. I won't even go into them, but there's all kinds of pieces of evidence that seem to be either hearsay or some observable things that we see that makes us question where we are. And Christianity, as an example, because again, I just don't know enough about other religions to really use the other religions as a place to jump off in this conversation, so I'm not trying to pick on Christianity. But I think what I'm about to say about Christianity is just as true for any religion that believes in a similar, higher being and perhaps some sort of need for salvation. You don't know. That's the truth. You may have had godlike experiences and spiritual experiences. I am willing to believe that completely. But, save being asleep and having a dream, getting in some sort of high chemical cocktail in your brain because you're in some near-death experience, save dying and seeing your body and floating away and then coming back. Most of us haven't had those chronic experiences, and so they're those severe experiences. And so I can tell you right now, to my knowledge, I've never met God, never heard his or her voice. I think I've had extremely spiritual experiences. I feel like I've derived plenty of strength and wisdom from the universe, of which I would call a God or God. But in terms of the Charlton Heston Bible version of it all, I don't have any of those experiences, And out of the tiny population that was on Earth when this stuff was going down, geez, who didn't have a personal liaison with God? It was like it was no problem to walk into a plaza in Rome and go, okay, who's talked to God? Okay, you 50 people go over here, and everyone else that doesn't have a personal experience with God, you go over here, But you don't know. And because we don't know, like if I'm sitting with someone that's all about heliocentric Earth, and I believe it's heliocentric because of expanding Earth. I think expanding Earth needs to be 50 times bigger on the internet than it is right now, because I think it explains every geographical anomaly that we see out there. And again, it looks like when you pull the continents together based on the seams in the bottom of the ocean, like I said in the previous episode, it makes a ball. It does. It's just math, okay? And you could say it could happen on a disc. Maybe you can. I don't know. But if I talk to a heliocentric person, they can yell at me or yell about the subject matter and say, oh my God, who the fuck? Whoever believes it's flat is just an idiot and da-da-da-da-da. And I'm just like, well, that's your choice, man. It's your choice. If you feel comfortable with it being a ball, then go for it. Just go out there on this ball and be a good person to other people, help people, guide people. And the same goes for the way that religions are propagated. Hey, if you can be a good person, a truly tolerant person, not your D&C tolerance, which is go out and have a fight, then you're a credit to your belief system. And I believe that if you ever wanted to evangelize and spread what you believe, then go for it. You're going to be a great example to the rest of us, right? What I find very interesting and very intriguing is that every time I've ever spoken about Christianity or God, yes, I guess they're both in there. I don't want to chicken shit out of the subject matter. I am telling you that God is infinitely wonderful and doesn't play games like man plays games. There's no eye for an eye in God's world, right? There's no anger. There's no punishment. There's pure love and pure understanding, and there's pure infinity. We like to say and boast through previously written words for us that God had no beginning and no end, acknowledging God as an infinite being. But the second that we talk about God's intellect, we immediately subtract that knowledge and that characterization and that credit to God and make him an idiot. Make him more juvenile than the chieftain of a tribe, right? One of the interesting things that happened to me in sort of a development way when I was in my 20s and I was transitioning from being strictly a senior engineer to being a manager of other engineers. And I'll just tell you, my first group was 2 people. I was the third. We all cut code. And just before I left and started working for myself about 12 years ago, I had 55 people. When you say 55 people, the thing I want you to focus on is 55 different lives of all different cultures. I mean, I had people from all over the world, Russians, people from Singapore and China and Japan and all over America, and America's, different enough, all from Europe and South America and India and every place on planet Earth. I had them all in one roof. I probably didn't have an Aborigine. That's probably the only one I didn't have, right? And they all had cultural differences, and they got along beautifully because we were in electronic arts, which was, one of the most incredible places to work at the time. But something happened to me that was very interesting, and that was that where I was a sort of, I'll put it this way, I was definitely drawn in before 25 into being sort of the complaining employee at times. I'd be frustrated with executive management of all different departments. I thought people would make good decisions and bad decisions, and the bad decisions seemed like, a no-brainer. But when I became a manager of a ton of people, it was almost as if there was a spiritual shift inside me where I was always calm and I was always the peacemaker, and people would bring, people would come into my office hysterical, telling me I should fire somebody. And I actually, within my first 6 months, to put it in perspective, I had a coup on my hands. And I mentioned this a long time ago, but a bunch of employees came in who were friends of a person who had left the company, and I lobbied to bring her back, and I worked with her heavily to bring her back, and she immediately tried to get a job in a different department within the first day of being back, because her boyfriend, who I helped get promoted to a different department, was in there, and she wanted to go work side by side with him. And when they found out the disloyalty that she had expressed, they came to me. Her friends who had worked with her for, in some cases, 2 years up to that point, told me I had to get rid of her because they weren't going to work with her. And this was a very peaceful company that doesn't have those kind of coups. And so I had to vet everything and check everything out, check out their claims. And sure enough, the other hiring manager walked up to me that night and said, so-and-so came over to me and she asked me for a job. And there's a policy internally, I got to talk to you before I can poach your employee. And I said, you know what? I just spent, 4 months lobbying with HR to create the position that was high enough for her. We even created a new designation in the HR catalog, a level 4 artist, and I got a big giant paycheck for her that was going to be higher than anyone had ever been paid for that job. And this was the loyalty I got back within 24 hours. And so I called her and I basically said, you don't need to come in. Why don't you go take that job in the other department since you almost have it, She didn't get either job. She was done. And blamed me for it, of course, right? But the reason I mention this exercise is that when I do this particular show, this isn't, it's obviously all about my opinion, right? I mean, what I'm trying to do, though, is aggregate our different opinions and offer some crossover when that type of episode occurs, right? We're talking about difference of opinions and that sort of thing. The other one that's interesting is that I think it's pretty clear I don't try to make episodes about things I've lightly experienced or lightly discussed. People give me these great suggestions for episodes all the time, and I sort of cringe inside because I realize they're right. This is a really amazing subject, like the city of Atlantis. People want me to do that one, and I'm trying to figure out a way to sift through what's already on the internet that's going to be better than anything that I make, right? But if I don't see something else, if I'm not enlightened in some way in taking that information in and sort of bringing, I think, a little bit more focus, meaning clarity to it, I can't do the episode, right? Religion for me it represents a backbone of my experience and my research that is unlike probably any other category of knowledge that I have. And I have categories where I have tremendous rabbit holes that I've dug, digging around and stuff. I was raised in a Catholic church because that's just what my family's believed in, at least my mom's family. And then they stopped making me go to church at 8. So then I jumped into, very deep into physics of all kinds from Newtonian to Einstein's bullshit, and more of Oppenheimer's quantum physics, and just really jumped in. And then I went cosmology, I went astronomy, and really tried to solve for where the hell are we from the age of 9 up. And very, very intense readings. I probably read more stuff at 9 to 10 than most adults have read in their entire lifetime about the subject, unless this is something you are passionate about, right? And I tried to solve for God in science. By 18, I was lured into a church because a buddy of mine that I was roommating with said, my buddy's got a music studio, you want to come see it? And I said, sure, because I wanted to make more music. And it was a church, and he was a son-in-law of one of the people in the church. He turned out to be a pedophile, by the way, and was convicted and served 2 years in jail for it after I left. He was a PhD, eventually got his PhD in Bible studies and taught at Pepperdine, and was hauled out of that place in handcuffs. Christianity did him a solid, let me tell you. But I dove into religion at a level that I had dove into science, but this time I was smarter, more strategic, and I was surrounded by Pepperdine University professors and amazing elders who just had sifted through this stuff themselves. And I was writing a book at the time that was very religious-based, and so I was cannibalizing everything that I learned and putting it into my story, right? And so I chose to be baptized at 19, and I stayed pretty into it until about 21, 22 years old. And then I popped out, and I had to move because the recession hit California, moved to the San Francisco area, south of San Francisco, San Jose, Sunnyvale area. And I stayed religious. I stayed, convicted to my Bible, right? And then I started studying Egyptology. Probably, I don't remember what year, 95, 96. Well, actually, it's probably about 94, because when I finally did, maybe 95. But I jumped in deep, and I was obsessing on this, and I don't do this anymore at all, which is interesting. YouTube is sort of the new place to, harvest information. And at least that's the kind of the bud of which I'll take information and then come back out and get literary content. But now, anything published at Barnes & Noble is you got almost a unanimous percentage of being propaganda. And so what you have to do is sift through the information and get periodicals that come straight from the source. And there was a lot of Egyptian archaeologists, rags, and San Francisco was a great place because they dig this kind of stuff, and so you could always find it on the magazine shelf. But you go to LA, you wouldn't see it. You go to Midwest, and you wouldn't see it. So I was really very, very privileged, and I spent a tremendous amount of time in Stanford reading papers and reading research and buying basically academic books and taking them home and reading them like normal books. And so I gained a really intense perspective from that point on. Then in this particular century, we have people like Dr. Outwell who've come out with this typology theory of Christ being a story written after Titus Flavius. So that added a tremendous amount of perspective. Because I'm hungry for the truth, right? I'm not hungry in getting more indoctrinated by a previous belief system. Now here's the thing. I always say on this show that truth feels good when it goes through your body. And I believe that to be 100% true. And I believe that lies and deceit feels negative in your system. Now, there could be a caveat to this where someone says, yeah, well, when I feel obligation to do something, I feel negative, even though it's what I should be doing. So there's a different type of, there's almost an exterior feel to your obligations that you don't want to do, and there's an interior feel for believing something fundamental to the universe that is simply untrue, right? For me, personally, when I sit down and I meditate, let's just say I sit out here, I put a little rug down or whatever, which I don't own, and I sit there and I meditate and I clear my mind. There's no planes going over, there's no, fat boy Harleys going by. Neighbors aren't making much noise. Maybe somewhere around 5 o'clock in the morning or maybe 3 in the morning. And if I insert into my system the thought that I have a God that creates original sin, it is oil to water. It is the most repugnant thought that I've ever had in my life. And it is so counter to any above ground definition of God, save, again, those that are very literal and wrathful, that I know I'm on the wrong track if I go down that belief system. The problem is once you remove that one lie, in my opinion, that man made to control man, it unravels a tremendous amount of the Bible's intent. Not all of it, right? Again, morality is morality. And this book, if nothing else, is trying to temper man from being chaotic and crazy, right? Now, I have a story, actually, I need to recall, because I said I've never met God. And I think that if there's one caveat to that claim, it's when I've always say on the show that I haven't had the Mormons come to my door in quite a while, but in 2011 they showed up on Halloween, the day after Halloween, right? I had my light off out front because I'd run out of candy the night before. So standing there in the dark, ringing the doorbell. And I ended up talking to these kids for about 11 months. And I went through several of the missionaries because they rotate and they go home and that sort of thing. But in the first month, it was very straightforward with them because I was doing an MK Ultra radio show and I was just so knee deep in everything that I told them, I said, look, I don't think Jesus ever existed. I think he's a wonderful person on paper, and I think that we all should read what he had to say, because I think, again, a lot of his parables that are taken from Egyptology and Sumerian texts that he repeated, which he's given utter credit for as originating, those are great. Those are man's finest hour figuring out how the world works, sifting the truth out of the universe and turning it into words, inspired by a creator, but not exactly the ones with the names that you've put down on paper for him, right? But they said to me, well, would you do us a favor? And I said, sure. They said, would you pray to God and ask him if Jesus Christ is his son and if the whole story of the Bible is true? I'm paraphrasing. And I said, I felt kind of weird. Immediately I felt that feeling of a lie, like immediately, right? And I thought, geez, I usually don't take this kind of stuff to God because I don't, think it's the best use of his time, but sure, okay, fine. I'll go retro, go back into my old belief systems and ask that question. And I think the timetable is about 2 weeks later. I think they had one visit before that, and then just before the second visit, I had this experience in this house. And again, you're talking to a guy, or listening to a guy that's basically doesn't believe in ghosts necessarily. I believe in spirits, but I don't think I've ever seen them necessarily, except for Walt Disney here and there. But nothing like, Casper the ghost showing up with two eyes looking through a sheet, right? I'm being facetious. But I woke up in my bed, and it was daylight out. My girlfriend was in the house somewhere messing around. And visually speaking, it was very different. It was almost Hollywood. I mean, it was Hollywood. I will say this: my eyes, whether they be glazed by a night's sleep or what have you, but very uncharacteristic of every other morning I've awakened with the lights on. It was like a crystal filter, like one of these star filters, I should say, where things looked a little bit more angelic, if you will, which is sort of silly in my opinion, but it happened. And I'm up there, and all I could hear was a feeling, if that makes sense. And it essentially said, "You have always been in my hand. We have always been together. We have never been apart. If we were ever apart, you wouldn't exist." So the mere fact that you know that you exist is the answer that you're really seeking here. Wild, right? It's one of these statements that, as smart as I might be, it seemed to eclipse my own ability to put it into words. So for anyone who's saying, oh, you're just listening to your subconscious, I would love to think that my subconscious was that brilliant and that beautiful and that poetic. And again, it was a poetic feeling that came over me, But the problem is that the voice or the feeling or whatever, it wasn't a voice, audible voice, but whatever was giving me this feeling did not answer the question that these Mormons wanted me to answer, which was, or wanted God to answer for me, which is Christ your son? And so I'm sitting there thinking, I mean, I'm feeling wonderful. I'm feeling amazing, right? I'm sitting there thinking, geez, this is so special. But I have to go back in having taken something from my Creator that was beautiful, and I have to kind of go back as if it's not enough. And in the end, it was enough for me. In the beginning, it was plenty. It was a sort of a godly experience, right? And so I push back. I mean, I literally push the message back up. What about Christ? These Mormon kids want me to ask you about Christ. And all I remember was I was sort of holding myself up in the bed, looking down at the sheets, just trying to get out of bed, but not getting out of bed as to not hang up the phone on this conversation, sort of, right? And the message came back and it said, who would want you to believe that I would kill my only son? And what do I see in my head? Projected immediately, a serpent in a tree. And it was the Luke, I'm your father moment, or no, I'm your father moment, that they always talk about in writing class, where the actor goes, oh my God. And that was it. That was the end of the conversation. It confirmed what wasn't true, and I think did a pretty damn good job of confirming what is true. And what was true was godlike, simple, infinite, beautiful. I am here with you always, and you've never been without me, and you need not ask man to get closer to me. You just need to take care of yourself, right? You need to be good, and then you'll get as close as you can get. And it's sort of like a subtextual insinuation that, well, when you come to the other side, you will feel better here the better you live a life on earth. And if you live a shitty life on earth and you're an asshole to everybody and you step on heads to get ahead for whatever indoctrinated reason or fear-mongering thing that you believe yourself, you're not going to be so comfortable around those that didn't do that, right? Consequently, it's probably ironically related to how tolerant we are of each other's differences, regardless of what you believe. But at that point, I was awakened to a theory that I had never considered for a second, which is the first scene in the first book was the devil telling you what to believe. The clue is right in front of your face, man. And man has been in control of man ever since this book arrived. And what's interesting is, for me, most religions, Islam and various Muslims, they do believe in a God and that there are punishment, and they believe in a very wrathful God and a very man-made God. But I think most religions walk around with just a rule book of how to behave, sort of the Old Testament technology. But they do not believe that they have to kill things in order to kind of absolve their sin. But before we close out, let's talk about that algorithm, right? Why would man create a story of original sin and the need to sacrifice something to clear you of your sins? All right, well, how do you feel when you fuck someone else over? How do you feel? How do you feel after you lie, either through embellishment of your own deeds or concealing something you did against another human being, perhaps the one you're talking to? How do you feel? How do you feel when you know you're supposed to do something but you don't do it? Or, you do it when you're not supposed to do it? Does anyone feel really great inside when you eat the cake and you're already 80 pounds overweight? We don't feel very good, do we? And this is what we call life. Life is full of these moments. And we need something. Talk to a psychologist, talk to a psychiatrist, and ask them about patients that come in with just guilt dripping out of their ears, of what sort of rehabilitation that they need. They need to stop feeling guilty. I think in the most absolute sense, they need to go back and clear the slate. They need to tell people that they lied to that they lied and apologize, like you see at the end of every sitcom, right? And hell, most movies nowadays. Everyone kisses and makes up. It's an age-old formula for storytelling. It's all over Hollywood. But we needed some form of ritualized sequence in our life to get this pressure off of our chest. And sadly, I think that religion has allowed us to sort of become not so good to each other, right? Let's just say it's the 1500s. You live in Europe. Inquisition's all over the place, right? And you are a merchant. And, life is hard because the king or queen and all these legions are taking your money, taking your tax money. The biggest guy in the village doesn't like you, and so he kind of roughs you up every time you try to walk from your shop to your house. You don't know if he's going to kill your kids, and there's a plague going around. I mean, it's just a weird world. And so you have to do things when you sell products. You have to screw some people with prices that are way too high, and other times you can cut someone some slack, negotiate down, right? But every day you kind of feel like a chump because you're not being a good person when it comes to the global picture of how humanity might behave. But you're doing what you got to do to survive. Now, if you have a paradigm in which you can exhaust all that guilt in a confession booth at a Catholic church, you're telling a preacher what you did, and they're saying go home and do all these different prayers and rituals and what have you, but you keep bringing in the same sins every Sunday. What's happening there? You're getting it off your chest, but you're not becoming a better person. You're just getting it off your chest. Think about all the pedophilia that runs around inside churches. And I know that no one in their right mind who's a normal Christian sanctions any of that behavior. Trust me, I'm not dragging you into that realm. But for people that did bad things, killed somebody, raped somebody, all they had to do was come into the confession booth. Probably need to donate to Rome, but you come in and you confess and you're cleared. It doesn't bring the person back to life. It doesn't give a rape victim back their sanity. It doesn't give back the money to the person who bought something from you that you screwed. So society is injured, but you're not. And that's the functional paradigm that the old school Catholicism facilitated. Now, again, we don't, unless you're a Catholic, you don't have this sort of ability. What I'm saying is, according to my research, according to my logic, God is much more forgiving than that. But God leaves it right in your lap. You did something wrong? He just says, go fix it. Because you will die, and even if you do reincarnate, you're going to be up here with everybody you fucked. And you're going to be forced to, in fact, it's not even, you don't have this is the way I perceive it. You won't need to confess it to these people because you can't be in that afterlife in a ball of lies. And that afterlife, if we maintain any knowledge of ever being human to begin with, maybe we don't, your overall frequency is going to be a little weird, right? Now, maybe the beauty of being infinitely brilliant is simply you go to the other side and just leaving your mortal coil and heading up to that bright spot in the universe, as a metaphor. All of your deeds from your life just strip off of you. They're irrelevant. And you're just in the other side. The pure soul that you were before you were born returns, unscathed. Perhaps, hopefully, wiser, nicer. Even if you were a bastard, you realize immediately upon exiting your body that you were a bastard, that it was due to being beat up and messed with as a child. And you're no longer a part of that world. Everything that made you weird is gone now. And so what's the point in talking about it? What's the point in paying penance for it? What's the point of hell? Right? Again, there's a great Twilight Zone of which I just watched the other day. I tried to remember the name of it, but I forgot. It's about the bank robber who, or whatever, he's a thief. He steals a bunch of stuff. He goes outside. He gets shot by the cops, and then this, heavyset guy shows up in white outfit and says, come with me. The guy's very suspect of him, and he takes him to a palatial penthouse suite and says, all this is yours. And he doesn't believe him, and he tries to shoot him, and he realizes he can't die, and he goes, oh my God, and he goes, I've gone to the other side, haven't I? And he's like, yes, sir, you're no longer alive in that world, but you're alive here, and you can have whatever you want. And the beautiful nature of this Twilight Zone is that they have this guy in what man refers to as heaven. He gets anything he wants. He can do anything he wants. He can eat as much as he wants, have as much sex as he wants. He can play poker, win all the time, because that's what heaven is, right? You might subtract sex, but you get what you want. You live in a blissful existence forever. And by the time the episode's over, he realizes he didn't go to heaven. He went to hell. That the choice that you have in heaven, that the choice you have on earth, didn't exist in hell. I've never known anyone to define heaven as a place where you can lose, where you can be unhappy, where you can make a bad choice. You're almost by design forbidden from making bad choices. I think you get what I'm saying, right? We're not alike. None of us are alike, and that's what makes the world infinite and beautiful, flat or spherical. That's the gift that God gave us. If you believe God is wrathful, then that is your belief. And if that makes you a good person, then that's what you need to motivate you. I find it much more enlightening and intense to believe that God is put it all in my lap as an adult and says, you know what's right, you know what's wrong. Now live your life. And I think you understand what'll be really valuable when you get here, what kind of life that you needed to have lived when you get here. And I think you know what life you do not want to live before you come here. And I think that us loving each other is probably right at the top, if not at the tippy top of what we can do within this paradigm, right? Loving God would be perhaps 0, number 1. The first thing in the number set, the absolute. But just below that priority list, it's us loving each other, being tolerant of each other, right? I always say to my friends and family that sin is intent. Right? I think that most of you understand I'm not trying to misguide any of you, right? Every once in a while people call me a shill. Go watch my episode on shill, and we can have a conversation about that. But most of the time, if anyone's rubbed wrong, they get rubbed wrong and they move on, or they get rubbed wrong and they have the patience and tolerance to watch a few more episodes or get through the one that they're having a problem with, and sometimes they come around. They're like, hey, I got you all wrong, man. I saw your long hair. I thought you were an asshole. But I listened, and it wasn't so bad after all, right? I don't do this in front of a live audience, right? And I don't, sit on the edge of my seat to find out how many people like my video or comment on the video, It is fascinating when a video gets a lot of counts. It's really fascinating. Just one on Flat Earth, it's over 1,000 and it's not even a week old. And I've got videos that are, 2 years old that can't get over 500, which I think are some of my best videos. But, season 1 is just a mess, in terms of getting the microphone right. I had the microphone right against my mouth. I have found some software to fix audio, but unfortunately YouTube doesn't allow me to swap out a video. So if I repost, it'll be very confusing to someone coming in to see a bunch of season 1s at the top. So that's why I have vid.me, where I actually re-engineered the sound for a lot of things. Someone just made a comment that episode 2 was almost inaudible. He's absolutely correct, and vid.me has the better version of it. In fact, when I was remastering it for vid.me, I would pull up the audio and look at it, and it was so low on the gain scale that I was surprised that I ever published it in the first place. But I know what the hell I was doing at that point, because I always made it an audio file for radio. But anyway, hopefully this is valuable. If you're angered by something I say in the video, I do apologize. If I knew you better, I obviously probably wouldn't go down certain rabbit holes in front of you. I would respect that we have differences. I got friends of mine that are extremely religious that I smoke cigars with, and when they're in the room, I respect their beliefs, and I know it's way different than mine, and I really just try to stay out of the conversation, or where we have a commonality. I'll even talk, I'll jump into the conversation for 10, 15 minutes as if I'm a Christian, and I celebrate their various belief systems and mechanisms, because there are things that I believe have value. I just don't go as far as to say, that Christ is my particular savior. That's all, So again, this is an organic process that we're going through. Again, for those of you who are longtime commenters, I would appeal to you to continue spreading your word and your beliefs within the comments, and just understand there's going to be tons of people that view your comment and go, yeah, this guy, he's lost in this area. And this guy who's commenting right here, this girl, he or she has it right. And that's where I am with that particular belief system, right? Again, I'm meandering. DeepThoughtsRadio.com for all the fees. There's video if you're on audio if you're on video. There's a locked Facebook group. There's vid.me for a completely remastered season 1, where, again, you can see it without being cut off by YouTube. I think that's about it. So why don't you take care of yourself and someone else, and we will see each other again on Deep Thoughts. Over now.